From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. All right, we're joined with Joe Childs here. Joe is a grazer in southwest Wisconsin, grazes a lot of acreage on a lot of leased land and does some contract grazing and custom grazing. So Joe, welcome. You want to do a little bit of introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Taylor. I think you kind of nailed that as far as my farming experience. I grew up on a dairy farm not far from here, and we had about 40 cows at the beginning, and I think towards the end we got up around 50 to 60. End up selling those. We were on, percentage for somebody. We didn't own the farm. We were just hired hands, my parents, and so we got out of that, and they bought a house in Mount Zion, and it was about 6 months before we jumped back into raising our own beef, just because we couldn't afford to eat beef from the store as much as we wanted to eat beef, and then we just didn't really like it as much either, so we started raising some cows, some steers that we had bought from the sale barn, and just kept grazing from there. Eventually built up our herd to about 15 steers every year, and when I went off to college, I swore off the farming life, got out of farming, got a job for Walmart as a store manager, and that lasted all of a year during COVID, and did a little stint with business-to-business sales, and the whole time I was doing that, I was fielding calls about renting land and trying to find a way out of that world so I could get back to farming. Then first year I rented, looking back on it now, I ran myself ragged because I rented all the way down from DeSoto to close to Fenimore. And so I was running around like crazy. Had about 600 acres the first year, grazing about 180 head of cattle, cow-calf pairs, and it was crazy. And now I've finally got the formula down to about a 20-minute drive is the longest drive between pastures. So other than that, I coach basketball, and I work from home for Crawford Stewardship Project, and try and find some odd jobs here and there to make ends meet when I'm not grazing.
Yeah. What first, you talked about you guys were grazing. What was the evolution of your grazing practices? Were you stock set originally and did you start paddocking up things, or did you always rotationally graze?
We never set stock grazed, and it wasn't because we were against it. That is a model, and on some of my pastures, the first year where I was further away, it was essentially a set stock, but it was like it was just a longer term rotation. I was still rotating cattle. It was just on a longer period because it didn't pencil out for me to be driving there every day or even, twice a week. But as far as my parents, I grew up on a grass-based dairy, and that was just how we did it. I didn't even know that there was another option. I still remember the first time we heard of a parlor going in, and that was 70 miles away in Patch Grove. And we heard through the grapevine that some guy put up this big rotary parlor, and that was like big news. But then my dad has always just preached moving the cattle and just giving the pasture time to rest, and I didn't understand it at the time, but now looking back on it, and he didn't understand that he was, this forward-thinking guy. Yeah. He was just, that's how you graze. You got to give the grass time to grow back, or else the cows will just eat it down to a carpet. So there wasn't really too much of an evolution. It was just that's how we always did it, and now people seem to think like they've reinvented the wheel somehow. It's like this big revolutionary thing of letting cows eat the grass and then letting the grass grow back.
Yeah. No, people have been doing it for a long time. That's the cool thing about Acres is you see some of these books that were written in the 70s and 80s, and they're talking about rotational grazing, and it's been happening for a long time. We obviously have such better technology now to make it easier on us. How many farms do you have right now, and how many acres are you running?
So right now, I'm in the scrambling. I shouldn't say scrambling. This is usually when I start to look for my landowners and cattle owners. But last year I had, I think, 6 farms, and I was grazing 110 head cow-calf pairs. Then I had my small flock of 36 Katahdin hair sheep, somewhere around there with the lambs and everything. And then I have a small, very small herd of cattle myself that I'm just trying to get going, where I think there's 5 or 6 there. But yeah, I had about 400 acres last year. Really consolidated to where Soldiers Grove was kind of my base, and within a 10-minute drive from there, all my pastures were located. So it was really nice to get back to like having a home base. Unfortunately, it is a very location specific or business. It's not something that you can really expand much without having more expenses of driving further and more time involvement, and just the overall stress of, if I rent a farm that's half an hour away and the cows get out, what the hell do I do?
Yeah. Or are you going to know about it?
Yeah, or if
I know,
I'm going to know about it, and you generally don't know about it until a pissed off neighbor calls you.
Yeah.
Or the cops.
Yeah. So that's one. We're developing a similar system. We had 3 farms last year, and now we will have 4 this year. Of the 6 farms, are you grazing all of them throughout the year, or are you loading cattle up and taking them to one
No.
farm, other farm, or you have them there the whole time?
They're there the whole time. So what I'll do, the way it worked last year is I had 3 different cattle owners. One was an Amish man, and so he got the closest pasture to his place, and that was, maybe 3 minutes from my base farm near Soldiers Grove. The other guy out of Boscobel, he brought 44 out to me, and he had one farm that I had rented that it could fit all 44 plus mine. So there's actually 50 head of cattle on there, and that's only an 80-acre farm. But I'm daily rotations on that, if not twice a day, because I'm there every day. And then another guy at a Prairie, he had 80 head, but they were broken up into different spots. I don't load cattle out and take them here and there. The most I'll do is maybe drop a bull in and take the bull out. And then towards the end of the season, if I'm noticing the grass is starting to get short, I'll load some cattle out. But they're going back to their owner. And that's what I try to tell anyone who's looking to get into contract grazing is you've got to have that written down in your contract that, within X number of days or weeks, if I give notice they need to be taken out, then they need to be taken out.
Yeah.
And that's something that's special to, I think, operations like mine that operate on rented ground, because I can't tell the landowner what they're going to do with their land. If they get a wild hair and they say, you know what, it's July, it's August, I don't want the cattle here past August 30th. Well, I've got to respect that, because I can find other cattle owners. It's hard to find good landowners, so you got to keep them happy.
Yeah. What is the arrangement with the cattle owner? Are you writing the contract? Are you taking care of the mineral vet type stuff, or is it something that they're responsible for?
I'll try and address as much as I possibly can on my own. I've got limited veterinary skills, but I can get something in a chute and give it a shot if they need it.
So do you have a chute at each place?
No. A lot of the times if it's something that's really bad, I will try and get it in a trailer and get it to a place with a chute. A lot of times, I'm sure you've done it before, but 2 gates squeezed together. You're not doing that with some of the cattle because they're just crazy.
Yeah.
Some of the cattle, they're not doing that. But a lot of times it's calves. You get a calf that's got pink eye or something, you get it in a chute, and it's fairly easy. Or get 2 strong guys and tackle it.
Yeah. Have you thought about renting or buying one of the guns?
No, I haven't. The arrangement that I have with the cattle owners is they're responsible for all veterinary stuff. I keep an eye on the herd. If I need to, if I can, I'll get them in and get a shot, whatever it is, or get them in and call the vet. And a lot of the cattle owners, they understand that. Like, this happens with cattle. That's what they do. They they eat grass, they poop, and they die. That's like, they get sick sometimes, and sometimes they die. So that's locked into my contract right there, is I'm not responsible for any death loss. It does not matter what it is. I'm not responsible for it. I wanted to make that very clear up front, is because I don't want to get in a he said, she said, it's your fault, it's my fault sort of thing. Livestock die. It's saying if you have livestock, you have dead stock. But then the vet stuff, I always call the owner. Hey, number 42 looks like she needs some veterinary assistance. Do you want me to call the vet? And usually, they say, send me a picture, maybe I'll come out and see her, and then we'll make a decision. But it's up to them, and then I just have the vet send them the bill. As far as like mineral stuff, what I usually do is I try to price it so that they buy it. I will buy it and be responsible for it, but I'm also going to charge.
Yeah.
I'm going to charge a fee for that. I'm not going to spend my money up front and then hope that I get paid back from you. If it's going to cost you 10 cents a day to feed it, if you buy it, then I'm going to charge you 20 cents a day if I buy it, just because not everyone pays their bills.
Yeah.
So I've been strung out like that before by
Yeah.
somebody. So I usually just price it in, and they figured out, oh, it's cheaper if I just buy it and drop it off at his place and he feeds it. So that's what they normally do. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of logistical things that need to be figured out in those contracts. That's for sure.
A lot, yeah.
How have you had good luck finding people that, because obviously the person that owns the cattle has to trust the fact that you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So have you found people that they want to come out and take a look at your other farms to see how you're grazing? And also, have you found people that actually care about the fact that you're moving them?
Yes and no to both. There's some people that want to check in on the cattle and that will just show up unannounced, which is something that you need to make sure that you have someone like that paired with a landowner that doesn't mind that. Some landowners, they're very private people. They're just renting it out to get the tax break, and they don't want a bunch of people just showing up at their house randomly. So that's something. But then there's other cattle owners that are just like, hey, I'm not feeding them hay all summer. You take them in May and bring them back in October, and we're good.
Yeah.
As long as they come back looking decent and they've got their calves at their side and not too much death loss, I'm fine with that. So.
Are you looking at a day rate then?
Yep, per head per day.
So what's your target that makes it worth your time?
That is a lot, as with a lot of farming stuff, that depends. A lot of business stuff, it depends. If it's a closer farm, I've got a good relationship with the landowner and a cheap lease, I can offer that cheaper. I'll say it. I charge $1.50 per head, or sorry, $1.50 per animal unit. So if you go on any extension website for any state, a cow-calf pair is 1.3 to 1.4 animal units, depending on where you look. So $2 a day per head for a cow-calf pair. And anything that is weaned up until bred is $1.50. I just call that an animal unit, even though the numbers fluctuate there, depending on what extension site you go to. So $1.50 per animal unit. And if you get into like, a big Angus bull or a big limousine bull or whatever, I usually charge $2.50 a day for those.
Yeah.
They do tear up pasture, and just handling bulls and being around bulls is just, I'm going to make an extra $150 over the summer, which isn't a ton, but I've got spots in some of my pastures where bulls just go and just tear it up every year and waller in it and dig it out. And so it's just something to kind of incentivize the cattle owner to only have the bull there during the breeding window and then take it out, because I don't want to have it there, all summer tearing up fences or anything like that.
And then do you set up your lease agreements to be the same thing based on animal units per day?
The lease agreements, I think, are, if I do have something that's like proprietary, I guess, or my competitive advantage, the lease agreements is probably the one, just because I understand how to work with the people. And a lot of the leases that I have are people that I've known for a while, or friends of people that I've known for a while that heard through the grapevine or whatever that I was doing this and that I was doing a good job. I've got free leases. I've got leases that I overpay for, but I do it just because it's a really great lease and it's close to home, and it's something that I could see myself ended up purchasing in the future if I keep leasing it every single year. Good relationship with the owners. Just maybe they just like to have that money. So I end up overpaying for some leases, and I have 2 free leases.
Yeah.
So that works out pretty well for me. But it's taken a couple years to develop that free lease of inspiring confidence in the landowner that, hey, I'm going to take care of your place.
That's the old Greg Judy model. You go, you are a land manager on people's property, especially the people that maybe aren't, local, or they're away, and you exchange, essentially making sure you take care of the property. It's the way, it looks the way that they want it to look whenever they do come, and they're happy to, have someone there taking care of things.
Absolutely. I think that is the number one and most important part when you're going to go and sign a lease. And you should be signing leases before you have cattle owners. You don't want to get into a place where you have 100 head of cattle and you end up not having a lease for them, because now you've soured that cattle owner, and any of his buddies say, yeah, this guy was supposed to take my cattle and he didn't have any pasture. Well, now the cattle world is big, but it's smaller than you'd think. And these guys know each other and they talk to each other. And
yeah, for sure.
But just sitting down with your landowners and finding out what they want from their land, that's the number one thing, because everyone's different. One of my leases, they're avid hunters. They want everything out by October 1st at the latest, and because they want the woods to rest before deer season. By all means, that's what's going to happen then. So you got to try and, you can stock it heavier because you're going to be taking it out earlier, but you got to find a cattle owner that is willing to do that. And then other people, I've grazed from April until December 1st on some leases. So it's really just what the landowner wants, what they value. Some of my landowners value the fact that if they call me for a completely non-cattle related thing, I'll go over there and help them do it. Put up Christmas lights, level out some dirt that the septic guy left behind or whatever it is. Just doing some work. And that'll go a long ways for your couple hours of labor, especially for older landowners. You're going to be making like $200, $300 an hour, because they'll knock off a bunch off your lease just because they know you'll come and help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, where did you, I think this is the best way for younger people to get into it that don't own land. But it involves a business and customer service type mindset where you're selling yourself to 2 different people. You're selling yourself to the landowner and the cattle owner. So have you developed like pamphlets or something that you just go around and hand out to, say, landowners? Because I always said if someone wanted to really hustle, they could make brochures, and here's the highlights of what you do, especially with the way rotational grazing, regenerative agriculture is, becoming popular now. People want that type of production on their land. So how far have you gone as far as like the marketing to find people, and then making sure you have the customer service background to keep people happy?
I guess the customer service background is more, I'd probably attribute that to my old man. He was, he's always been kind of a tenant farmer. And like we've got a good relationship with the farmer down the road that every year that we needed hay, we never paid for hay, ever. Even when we had, 15, 20 head of cattle we're taking through the winter, we didn't pay $1 for hay because he was going down and, helping make hay, helping, cut, rake, and bale hay. And, if fences need fixing, we go down and do that. So I've noticed from a very young age that, and we didn't have money growing up by any means whatsoever. So, but we were still able to do what we were doing because I noticed that my dad, did these things kind of on the barter system. And, if you're nice to people, they'll pay you back way more than what your help was worth. And so I think that's where it came from, is just watching my parents growing up make stuff out of nothing, essentially, being able to do stuff without money. And then as far as the marketing, I'm finishing up my website. This is the first website I've ever built, but it's very simple, just trying to get that down. It's called X Marks the Farm. But the website's not done, so don't go visiting that. But that's the furthest extent of marketing that I've done. Most of my marketing comes from, kind of like I didn't contact you guys, you just kind of heard of me, and that's been just word of mouth. But the first year that I did this, I drove around with just handwritten business cards. I'd drive around to people's houses. If I'm driving down the road and I see an old degraded fence and no cattle in it and it's all grown up in brush, I think, well, someone's definitely not renting that. I'll go and knock on their door and leave a card, and I got one lease that way, and I probably stopped at 50 different places. But then just threw an ad on Facebook and Craigslist, and people were looking for cattle or looking for pasture, and then there was a bunch of landowners that just don't want to do the legwork of finding a cattle owner, and then don't want to deal with the cattle owner themselves. They want someone that is going to be there whenever you call. That's their full-time job.
Yeah.
So just kind of meeting a need for both of those people is really what the business comes down to.
How do you deal with the fencing?
That can be depending on the lease. If I got a free lease, then I'm going to put in fencing myself. Repairs and stuff. If we're going to build a brand new fence where there wasn't a fence before, or fix a fence that is just completely degraded, and we're talking tens of thousands of dollars, I'm not doing that.
Have you had luck with landowners saying we'll put the fence in if you buy the materials, essentially?
Yeah, it's in smaller chunks. I just put up it was a 3-wire high tensile electric, but it was a solar fencer on it, and the calves every day I drive by just dreading going around the corner, because I'd see 4 or 5 black Angus calves sitting on the side of the road, getting phone calls at 10 o'clock at night, So then I told the guy, I said, listen, I'll buy it if you don't. And he goes, no, I'll buy it. So then we went and got barbed wire and put all in, put a couple extra wires up. And usually the landowners are pretty easy to work with on that, because they don't want someone hitting a cow that was on their property, because who knows who's going to get sued in that situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you put liability stuff in the contracts with the lease?
So I'm liable for keeping them in the fence. That is, I'm offering a service of caring for the animal. So I'm liable for that. And it was, boy, that could be a whole podcast just talking about how to get liability insurance for something like this, because I know I'm not the first person that's ever done it, that has rented land and then, don't own the land, you don't own the cattle. I know I'm not the first person that's done that. Maybe one of the first that's doing it to this scale in this area. And insurance companies, oh my goodness, they looked at me like the Black Death. I come in and they're like, well, how do you have an insurable interest? You don't own the land, you don't own the cattle. And then explain to them why I have an insurable interest. And then all of a sudden I have too much insurable interest, because now I'm liable to pay for the cow to the landowner or to the cattle owner, and I'm liable to pay for the injuries to the person who hits hits the cow if it gets out, and then I'm liable to the landowner for damages. So all of a sudden it goes from you can't even insure this because you have nothing to insure to we won't insure you because there's too much risk. And it took a long time to figure out how to cover that. And finally, give a shout out to Fleming Agency in Boscobel. I called them at 8 o'clock, and they had a quote for me and a policy by 10.
Nice.
Like, God, I should have called them 9 months ago when I started looking.
Yeah, we use Fleming too. That's so it ends up being the insurance is on you, because I was gonna say I could see it being on the cattle owner.
There are 2 people that need to be insured. Well, really 3. I add them as an additional insured on my policy, so that if cow gets out, cow gets hit, the insurance company will pay for the value of the cow to the cattle owner. But as far as liability, I cover my landowner and I cover my cattle owner, so that because the person who's going to get sued is going to be me, and if I'm covered, then they'll just say, okay, well, let's go to the next person, let's go to the landowner because it was on their land, and let's sue them. And then if they're covered, let's go to the cattle owner. Like, someone's got to get sued, basically. And so I just try and cover everybody with that. And it wasn't actually that expensive. It's not cheap, but considering the return on investment that I got on it is pretty minimal.
Well, it makes everyone happy too.
Yeah, and some people just, the first year I didn't have any insurance. I was flying by the seat of my pants, just crossing my fingers, basically. And the second year I found a guy that is super nice guy. I have a free lease on his property. I mean, excellent guy, absentee landowner, avid hunter, calls me up to, just to talk and hang out. But he would not rent his land to me without liability insurance. He's very meticulous, comes from a finance background, all the details, cross your T's, dot your I's kind of guy. And so then I just told him, like, can you help me get it? And so he finally kind of walked me through, like, here's what to say to them in order to ease their mind, and finally got insurance.
Yeah. What is your, do you have like kind of a fencing rule if you're going to be running cattle on a place now that you've done it a few years? Like, I will not run cattle on this place if it doesn't have, this type of fencing along the road, or?
I mean, I've given up leases, like good leases, and just said I'm not coming back because they refuse to fix fence. They refuse to pay me to fix the fence, and they refuse. Like, they just, all the cattle are fine. And I said, well, then I can't deal with you, because just for peace of mind, because I travel, I go to conferences, and like through Farmers Union, I've traveled across the ocean to Europe, and like I'm gone sometimes, and then just being able to go fishing or something for an afternoon and not be sitting there thinking, God, I hope my phone doesn't ring. Like, every time my phone rang when I had those properties, it was like, now what?
Yeah.
And so I don't have any general rule of like, I will not rent your pasture unless it is this, this, and this. I did learn this year, if you're going to take a new cattle owner's cattle, go to their farm and look at their fences.
Yeah.
And it's really nice if you go to their farm and they've got really crappy fences, because then it's like, oh, they'll stay in.
Yeah.
If you go there and they've got, woven wire with hot wire on top, and I say, oh crap, these cows are not used to, 2-wire electric. And a lot of my farms are 2-wire electric in some places. And I got burned. I shouldn't say got burned, but I learned a lesson. I took a bunch of black Angus that had never seen an electric fence before, and then put them on a farm with only electric fence.
Yeah.
The calves were just a nightmare. They were out every day.
So this is, everything you're talking about has been my hesitation to actually scale this. And we did our first contract this summer, and I'm like, are they ready for electric fence? Oh yeah, they'll be fine. I'm like, are they though? So we made sure we built up an initial training pen.
Yeah, that's all you need to do, really.
Threw a hay bale in there to make sure that, because I don't trust, like what you're saying. I don't trust people's, I trust people, but I don't trust their opinion on how cattle react to electric fence. Because you go by, I go on farms sometimes, and I'm selling, and I always have a fence tester in my pocket. Like were you down with us this year? We went and got those pigs. Went down and got pigs from someone, and the electric fence around. And I had a fence in my pocket, and I went and pressed it, and it was like at 2 kV. I'm like, oh my God. I don't ever want our fence under, 6 or 7. So like everyone's perception of electric fence is a little bit different.
And that's I guarantee those pigs will stay in if they're staying at 2 kV.
Well, the pigs weren't out. They were in a barn, but the guy just had electric fence around,
Okay.
and because every time I see electric fence, I always throw a tester on it to see what people are running it at.
The cows that I had been grazing these Herefords for 2 years now, and they know me more than they know their owner, and they come to my call. Like, I can drive by the pasture and I'll call them and I'll see all their heads come up and just follow me all the way to the end of the fence. Like, they just know me really well, and I've forgotten that fence off for a week at a time.
Yeah.
And they don't touch it. Like, they just know. But
It takes a lot of time, though.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's how these guys are at our home place. Like, they're not. The fence probably has not been truly on for 2 or 3 weeks.
yeah, it's and especially in the winter. There's as long as there's a hay bale in there, they're not going
Right,
anywhere else.
right.
But that's the training pen. I'm glad you brought that up because I built up a 4-wire training pen, and I've got a 100-mile fencer at this farm, and I took off all but probably 1,500 feet. I mean, it was a smaller pen.
Yeah.
1,500 feet before wires, so just over a mile of fence on this thing, and it was a 100-mile fencer, and it's right next to the building. I mean, everything else was unhooked. I just grabbed a 6-pack and sat out there when the cows got dropped off and sat on the tailgate and watched calves get shocked. And
That's funny.
I've told that to people, and they're like, you watch them get shocked? I said,
Heck
yeah,
yeah.
I'd rather watch them get shocked than watch them get ran over. So
That's exactly what we do. Bring cattle onto the, if they're new cattle, we'll get a 6-pack and sit there and make sure that they, a good handful of them touch it throughout the, couple hours.
And I learned that from my old man. Like, I don't know if did you grow up dairy or anything? So, you get a dairy heifer, a calf, and it spends most of it, or the beginning of its life in a pen, and then it goes to a calf hut, and then it goes usually to like a holding shed. So they don't see electric fence until they're probably 700-800 pounds. And then you let them out, and the first thing they do is just run straight through it.
Yeah.
So I learned that from my old man. We'd have a pen in the back of the shed, and we'd run a wire through it, and we'd put the food on this side and the water on this side, and we'd leave a small opening to where they could get to both of them. But the first couple times they try walking straight through it, and it's funny to watch, but they only hit it maybe twice in their life. If they get those first two, it's like you don't want to go out and grab the electric fence. I've been shocked way more than twice, but not on purpose. I've only been shocked twice on purpose, and that was because I didn't know what it was really.
It's shocking how quickly. The first couple of years I did it, I would keep them in a pen for 2 weeks, and then I went down to 1 week, and I think last year was a day, essentially.
We would take like an old pop can or beer can and put it on there, something that's dangly and shiny, and they just reach up and touch that with their tongue, and boy, they don't even go close to it after that.
Do you go in stages when you start breaking them out? So like I'll put them in a pen, and then we break them out. The first paddock they're in, we'll try to run 2 wires, and then after that we go 1 wire. Do you progress them out of those pens at all, or you feel comfortable with that initial training?
No, the initial training is. I guess my philosophy is I don't care if 1 or 2 get out of the
interior,
paddock,
yeah,
as long as they're not getting out of the exterior. But then if you get, where they start, you come and half the herd's out of the interior, you gotta do something. But most of the time it was kind of cool. I didn't do it on purpose, but I have those pigtail step-in posts. I used to. I sold a bunch of them, but. And I would just put those out. Well, they're too high for the calves, and I was grazing some old alfalfa field, and it was really good stand of alfalfa, so I was pretty leery on how I grazed it. But the calves, they'd go out and they'd almost creep feed. Like, they'd get the best pickings. They'd go out there, and they wouldn't go too far from their mamas, but they'd go out there and they'd get to eat, the best of the best, and then the cows would come in and kind of clean it up. So, and the calves have a little bit more resilience to eating that stuff than the cows do. But I never use 2 wires unless I'm trying to graze like a roadside, which I've done that a lot just to try and extend my pasture rotations. I'll get maybe 3 to 4 days out of a roadside, and then I'll put up 2 wires just to make sure the calves aren't getting out.
Yeah. When we calve in the spring, we actually shut our fences off for that time, because the cows will just go hang out in different paddocks, and they like to hide too when you got tall grass. I spent a lot of time searching for calves the first couple of years in a panic. And then you go around searching for an hour and then walk back up the hill and look back and the calf's standing there. It's like,
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve when you're working with other people's cattle, and that was something I just had to learn because it hit me right in the face. It's like a lot of people don't spend as much time with their cattle as I did, as my parents did, and as I think you should. Like, you should be able to stand and call and have your cows come back. And just rotational grazing, that's inherent. Like, that's going to happen because they see you every day. The worst thing that I would ever do is if I would I'd go out and I'd get my reel and I'd bring it with me and I'd set it there. And then I'd go and, get the post set up and everything. And the whole time the cows are just bellowing at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, they're freaking out.
Because they saw that reel. As soon as they see that reel, they know they're getting a new grass. So I would drive out there, leave the reel in the truck until I got everything set up. And then I'd go out quickly, take the reel out, undo the other one, and then otherwise you got to sit there for 20 minutes listening to 50 Black Angus just beller like they've never been fed.
Gives you anxiety.
Oh, it just irritates me because I'm thinking, the neighbors are thinking these cows are getting, they don't have any food over here. And I used to get phone calls. Yeah, your cows are kind of loud. You gonna stop over there? I said, I'm up there right now.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're bellering?
Yeah. No, that's definitely that's funny. It's almost like we always try to set up the next few paddocks ahead of them, but because they get rammy when they see you and they're ready to go. Yeah. And if you can't let them in right away, it's always stressful.
I would walk through if they're all standing right by the, just standing there bellering. I'll just walk through and I'll push a post over and shotgun them on the butt or something.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Quit doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the things that you've learned in the rotational grazing spectrum? Like, how much grass you're trying to leave? What different things have you found that work well?
This is probably where I differ from a lot of people. Is I hate when people are like, you need to do this, you have to do that, you have to graze it at this height and leave this much. That's great, but tell me that when you're on the ground, you're the one doing it, because you just do what you can to make it work. Like, if you overgraze a pasture for, you've got something that comes up and you've got to leave them there a day longer than you thought you were going to, and it gets overgrazed, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, if it works for you, it works for you. What will happen if you try and go by everyone's rules and the rules of thumb? They're great targets, and you should strive to get to those. But as far as if it just burns you out because you're moving them 4 times a day, then stop moving them 4 times a day, because you're going to do that for 1 year and then you're going to quit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just do whatever works for you. And for me, it was some pastures I'd move every 2 days, some pastures I'd move twice a day, just whatever worked. But really, it depends on every single different farm. Some farms got really good grass that's growing up like crazy, and a couple other of my farms, they're old hay fields that never saw manure, and they just got strip mined basically every year. Just they'd take hay off and they'd sell it, and they'd take hay off and sell it, and nothing ever got put back on. So those farms, you got to be pretty careful with your stocking rates and really quick moves.
Do your landowners seem to notice the difference after a couple of years?
Yeah, and I try to show them that, because especially the ones where maybe I'm not paying a ton of rent, or maybe it's a landowner that is just doing it because they want to break on their taxes pretty much, or the ones that just care about their money. Like, you got to show them that you're bringing value to their property, so that the person down the road that says, hey, he's paying $600, I'll pay $800, they don't rent to that person, because that's what will happen. I look at I never knew there was so much drama in renting crop ground, but that's what happens.
Oh yeah.
People have lost good friends and family feuds and everything with, I need 200 extra acres this year. I'm going to go offer this guy an extra $50 an acre and take it out from underneath somebody. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
I was very cognizant when I was renting land, because I had a couple landowners approach me and say, I'd like to rent this to you. And I said, oh, aren't you renting to so-and-so? They said, yeah, but, we like what you're doing. And I said, I'm not doing that. You need to talk with him
Yeah.
or her. And,
Well, no crop farmer is going to be happy if you take away some land and put it into
No.
grazing. And
No, God, no.
we can't pay what they pay either. Not even close.
And I'd love to get on the subject in maybe a different time, but the reason why is we are not subsidized to the point of crops. We can't
Yep.
go out and afford to pay $250, $300 an acre to grow beef cattle, because what if the beef market collapses? No one's coming in with buckets full of money to save
No.
us. So we've got to hedge our bets on that. And right now, yeah, you look like a genius if you're a cow-calf guy. You look like a genius and you'll be rolling in money. But 2 years from now, is that going to be the case? 5 years ago, were people lining up at the door to give you $1,000 for a weaned calf? No.
Have you ever bought cattle at the end of the year from the people that you're renting or that you're custom grazing with?
I have not, but I have taken calves on trade.
Yeah.
I as a farmer that's trying to build his herd, I love that.
I know. I think
love that.
it's because number one, you get to test the animals to see how they do on grass.
I get pick of the litter.
And then number two,
best
you
heifer calf.
Right, you could be like, well, instead of you paying for this custom, you walk away with cattle for a few head. It's I know you mentioned it. We're doing the same thing. We're building up our home herd because calf prices are so expensive and it's such a nightmare trying to buy them. But what's your plans? Would you like to see in the next 10 years that a lot of these lease farms have your cattle on them? Or you think custom grazing is just the way that you're going to... Because Greg Judy's teaching, essentially, he did this for, 10, 15 years, and he kept taking a little bit, putting it into his herd, and now, it's all of his herd, running all this lease ground.
I want to own land. I mean, the custom grazing is kind of a means to an end. I don't want to raise other people's cattle my whole life, even if it does pay more than owning my own cattle. I want to have my own stuff. It's some people don't really have that itch. Some people, why own when you can rent an apartment and work a job and you'd probably save more money. But for me, it's all about just having that freedom of I can do what I want with this acreage and with these animals. I can try things that maybe other people, like cattle owners, wouldn't let me try with their animals. Some of my cattle owners are very conventional, hormone implants and run them through a chute every year and give them all the expensive chemicals and stuff. Who am I to tell you not to?
Yeah.
You pay me to do it and I'll do it. But as far as, I'd love to see 1,600 acres like Greg Judy and have my own cattle on it, and I think that's,
all contiguous.
Yeah.
Oh, we went down to his place this last summer, and it makes sense there.
Yeah.
It makes sense there because it's just different. It's a different world,
Yeah.
different land. Everything is rolling pasture.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't growing crops. You're not competing with the crop growers. And his biggest rule is everything should be contiguous because you don't want to waste time, traveling around. But I don't think it's possible here.
No, that's why, like I said earlier, that's a great target.
Yeah.
It's a great target.
Well, yeah, I would pay more for that property than I would
100%.
for, one 10, 15 minutes away.
Yep. And that's, you just can't hit all those rules. And I love Greg Judy. That's why I got started. That was the only reason why I got started.
Same. I
went down a rabbit hole of his, and when he said I started this business with $12 in my account, I had just about $100 in my account. So I'm like, shoot, I'll have 6,500 acres in 20 years. If I got more money than he did when he started.
Yeah. Well, one thing he doesn't talk about that always is consistent with anyone I talk to is, Joel Salatin, Gabe Brown, all these guys. It's this, they have a blind just motivation too. Like they're just not giving up. Mm-hmm. And for, Greg is a perfect example of that too, because he, for so many years, worked in town and would move cattle at night or move, in the dark.
Building fence at night. And when I heard him say that, I'm like, God, I don't want to do that. And then I found myself building fence at night.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a personality thing where if you're self-motivated and can do it, this is, in my opinion, this is the way for people to get a hold of a lot of cattle without having to have all the risk.
And get the experience of.
But how do you get?
cattle.
I mean, you grew up in a farm, so you had that original experience. I didn't, so I had to. We bought our first. This was the last year was the first time we did any custom grazing, but it was because the year prior, I picked up our first lease farm, and we bought all the cattle for it. So I'm thinking in my head, will you buy in the spring from a sales barn around here, run them on grass, have them gain some weight, send them to one of those more expensive sales barns, that you always see on the internet.
Yeah. Send them to the corner with the black hide.
Exactly. And I got slammed.
Oh, yeah.
I got slammed on it. That's a great way to lose a lot of money.
It's called livestock for a reason. It is playing with the stock market. It's the livestock market. You can, like right now, I've got a guy that wants me to find pasture for 500 yearlings. So if you know of anybody that's got a lot of pasture that wants to make some money, but he's got 500 not yearlings, stockers, and I said, well, how do you have that many? Oh, I'd buy them.
I think I know who that guy is because
so you buy in the spring.
That's the guy that we probably had our grazing contract with last year, because he texted me recently and said that he had been in touch with you.
Oh,
and he's
JC?
got massive amounts of cattle.
Yeah, that's when
they bring them in from South Dakota.
Yep. I said, well, how far do you want to go? And he said, well, if they don't get any pasture here, they go to South Dakota. I said, okay, well, I can find some closer in South Dakota.
I will say something about his cattle is they're made to eat grass. He knows what he's looking for.
Yep. Oh yeah,
they performed amazing.
I've in the cattle market, and Casey tell you the same thing. There's a lot of guys that blow a lot of smoke, and they're usually the ones that are running around like bragging about how good they are, how much money they're making, and the ones that are not out there selling themselves are generally the ones that are doing a good job because they're not looking for customers.
Well, about that, it's another good way for people getting into this. The stuff that you learn from these guys that have been in it for a long time is invaluable. Like him, just working with him this past summer, the stuff that I learned from him, and you just soak it up. Like, just take in all the, because they're the ones that are actually, like, they're masters of playing the stock market. Like, they're masters of playing the sales
market.
They're
not doing this for for fun. They're not doing it for a little bit extra income.
It's their living.
Their livelihood.
Yeah.
Like this.
And they're talking about massive scale. Like, it's just, and after I ran his cattle, I'm like, all right, this guy knows what he's doing. Wherever he finds cattle, because we had talked about it too. I really should have. It's right now, it's such a mental game to actually pull the trigger on buying some cattle. Because I know in my mind, I'm like, they need to be good, so you need to be able to pay a price. But then you're always like, well, could I just go find a better deal somewhere?
I think this year guys will make pretty good money buying and selling just because the cattle market is the lowest it's ever been. Like the quantity. The supply is the lowest it's ever been. So I think the next 2 years you're pretty safe, but.
Say that. I mean,
come 2027 spring, I don't know if I'd be buying 500 head.
The thing that ruined me is so the first year we've always bought 500-pound stockers right around there. Fall calves, buy them in the spring. First year, average $1.25. Second year, average $1.70. Third year, average $2.20. And last year, I didn't buy any, and they would have been $2.50 to $2.80. And now I'm looking at prices, and I'm like, it's gonna be over $3.
Way over $3.
Yeah. So there's like, and that year that I had bought those cattle for our first lease farm, I had bought a bunch for here too. So we had at one point, I owned up to 70, and that was the year that we had no rain, 0 rain.
Yeah.
So I ended up selling some midsummer, and then I'm like, well, I'm gonna carry at least a lot of stockers across winter. Well, then you're looking at $100 hay. So I ended up pretty much blowing it up, selling everything. Giant mistake.
Corn silage will save you.
Yeah.
Corn silage. I mean, if you're trying to be all grass fed, obviously you can't. But boy, we have.
And that's how a lot of people made it.
Corn silage that it really cuts their hay intake down, and they still do really well on it. It's a very cheap feed if you buy it from a farmer that's got it. But generally, farmers that got it are
using
not
it.
want to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's where our latest podcast with Will Winter, he claims that adding apple cider vinegar to your bales cuts down the feed bill by like 20%.
Wow.
And it it does a lot of interesting things to the animals. Mineralizing. There's another question. What is your protocol for mineral intake?
Whatever
Whatever they
livestock owner
want.
wants.
Yeah.
I've got livestock owners that will call me and be like, "Hey, did you put mineral out?" "Yeah, I put mineral out." And I've got other ones that, "Hey, I dropped off a bag," and like 3 weeks later, they're like, "Oh, I should probably drop off another bag." Okay, I mean, it's up to you. I'll put out whatever you bring me.
Have you seen a difference in performance?
It's hard to say because it's not apples to apples.
Yeah,
it's
you're
different
running
farm,
different
different
animals.
cattle, different breed. I know you know Mark Castle, or not Mark Castle, Mark Shepherd.
That's where we
Yep.
that's where we run cattle.
Yep. So the stun, sheer total utter neglect. I wouldn't say neglect with cattle because you can't neglect them, but just put them out there, let them get access to food and water. Obviously, if there's something going on, they need to have some mineral, but I think people get super diving into things that are you're going to spend $1 to save a penny.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm not an expert by any means on cattle nutrition. I'm not an expert on grass. I'm not an expert on really anything. The only expert I'd say is probably basketball, about the closest thing that I am to an expert. But just keep them alive, make sure they raise a good calf. Beef is a lot simpler than dairy, and that's kind of how I've been raised. Is just, did they have a calf this year? Yep. Did the calf gain weight? Yep. Are they alive? Yep. Okay, they did their job this year.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not. Maybe you could have poured a little bit of $100 extra into the mother, and you would have got $50 extra on the calf. That doesn't pencil out in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. What are you seeing as far as who are you trying to target for cattle owners? Is there a certain breed that you're trying to
Absentee
target?
cattle owners.
Yeah.
As far as breed, oh.
Well, it's interesting how many people are like they live in a completely different state and they own cattle here and.
Yeah, and it's not even so much absentee, but just busy.
Yeah.
Busy cattle owners, and that's the only people that are going to hire you is busy cattle owners.
Well, and these guys, I've learned, like the people that have these giant herds, they are not like they're holding on to them as long as they can. Like
yeah, that's a bank account.
Yeah, I think the thing with cattle is they're like a savings account. It's as hard as it is to buy them, it's harder to sell them even. Because then you're always in the back of your mind too. Am I gonna get the right price for them? And,
everyone wants to sell right up here.
Yeah.
They don't want to sell here because they know it's going to go here, and sometimes you end up selling them the next spring when they're down here.
Yeah, that's a whole world that if you can get really good at, like if people that have financial backgrounds that are interested in stock market stuff, like they could hit the ground running on this. I mean,
they can stay out of the cattle business.
Well, they're the ones that they'll probably end up trading futures and things like that and not even have actual cattle on their farm.
Oh yeah. They're the ones that are gonna move the price around for the ones that have cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to get to a point where I'm, I'd love to have 300 acres and 200 head, and then rent 500 more acres or whatever it is, but. I'd also be very happy with a place that I'm looking at now is 3.5 acres with a small cabin, and I guarantee the first thing I do, it doesn't even have a well and septic on it. I'm building a fence around that thing, and there will be 2 head of cattle on that for the entire summer. I gotta have animals for me to even be sane. This is the first winter in my entire life. My entire life where I don't have animals to take care of. Since I was a small kid, we always were on a dairy. I was taking care of calves. Then this year, I was fortunate enough that I sent my cows to get preg checked with one of my cattle owners because he was going to preg check all of his in November. They pregnancy checked them, and then he called me up and said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to move those. I'm pretty busy. I'm not going to be able to load those up and haul them back to you until probably December." I said, "You want to just keep them, and I'll just knock off, next year's grazing. I'll just knock off, 3 or 4 head worth of." And he goes, "Yeah, that sounds fine."
Yeah. Well, I was wondering.
That's perfect.
I was
don't have to
wondering
take care of
too.
anything this winter.
Have any of these guys approached you about running them in the winter, feeding them hay?
Oh yeah, lots of people. I don't have the facilities.
Yeah.
I did outwinter one year. Second year, I outwintered 44 head of red Angus and calved out. And I told the guy, like, I don't have the facilities. He bought them from South Dakota. Said I don't have the facilities to calve out in February. Like, February, March is the worst time to calve in my like. Yeah.
Oh, he was wanting to calve in February.
He bought them, and it's not wanting to. They bought them, brought them here in December, and they were gonna calve in February.
That's a nightmare.
And he had seen the place. I said, here's where they're gonna be. They're gonna be outwintered. I have a shed that I can maybe get 9 or 10 in at a time, but that means
You'd have to know
I
exactly.
got to be there 3-4 times a day, which I was there 3 times a day to check them. But some of them bag up really bad, and then some of them just, it's like, boom, overnight they have a calf.
Right.
So we lost 9 calves out of 44. And, like, I was not happy, and he was obviously not happy. But I told him, like, you should have asked me before you just said, hey, I got 44 head I'm going to bring over. And luckily in the contract, I'm not responsible for any death loss.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd have got my butt sued there. But you just can't do that.
Are any of these guys bringing cows in that are about to calve in the spring? Do you deal with that, or you try to stay away from it?
Yeah, I mean, most of the cattle owners don't want to do that. They bring them in after they've calved out. But yeah, there's always onesie twosies that we're not going to hold up the whole herd because there's 2 cows left that need to calve.
Yeah.
They'll bring them over, and they'll calve out in May. I try to get on pasture. I keep telling myself one of these years I'm going to get on pasture May 1st. But every year it's May 15th, May 18th.
Yeah, it seems to be the same for us.
Never the perfect time.
On this place, we've been hitting it May 1st, but on the other places where it just always seems like either the person bringing the cattle, or if we need to buy cattle, it just drags on. Me. Yeah,
is the person hasn't calved all the way out yet, or it'll be 2 days before May 1st. I'm like, all right, we're gonna get on May 1st, and then it'll rain a bunch. I'm like, I'm not putting cattle out on wet pasture in May and then ruin it for the rest of the year. So we try to wait until we get a good weather spell to where we can get them out, get them unloaded, get them in a small training area, and I just don't want to destroy that training area.
Yeah. Have you had any problems with cattle hitting grass and having bloat or tetany?
I haven't had any cattle, any of the cow calf pairs bloat. I had my what the hell is his name? Gustavo, my bull. He's a red belted. Actually, I got a picture of him here. That's the cover picture. He's a Hereford belted Galloway cross, so he's fire engine red, and he got a white face and a full white stripe. So I kept him. That's a good-looking breeding bull, and he ended up being, pretty good bull. But he got bloat, and he was one that kind of turned once the heifers got there, and he just got kind of mean for a little while until the bigger bulls came and settled him down. But I had to squeeze him between a gate and shove a garden hose down his throat and dump some Dawn dish soap down there.
So you just noticed it in the way he looked?
Oh yeah, you can't miss it.
Blew up.
Left side, it looks like he swallowed a balloon. I mean, it was sticking that high above his spine.
Oh.
So, and he was walking around, but I was just feeding him too much grain because I had him separated off because I didn't want to breed in any of the other cows. But yeah, he wasn't happy about that.
So you saved him though.
Oh yeah. Bloat's not bad. Bloat is, you just got to catch it. You just got to
you got to be there every day.
Yeah.
Like, you think you would have been gone if you weren't there?
Oh yeah, he probably waited another 6 hours till the vet got there, but he could have gone another day probably. But if he would have got downhill, he would have been dead. If he would have laid down wrong, he'd been dead. But bloat's the easiest one to catch. Bloat and pink eye are, if you don't catch it, it's really bad. If you do catch it, it's easy to treat. It was a $75 vet call when he did get bloat, because I ended up calling him out just to make sure that he's my breeding bull. I really don't want to lose him.
Yeah.
So I called the vet, and he came out with TheraBloat, which is, he told me, he says, next time just take the garden hose and mix up some Dawn dish soap and hot water and dump it down his throat. Because it makes all the bubbles congeal, and then he can burp them out. Because what bloat is, it's really super tiny bubbles, and they can't burp it. It's like a congealed slime, and they just can't burp it out. But you put Dawn dish soap in there, and it makes it all bubbly, and they burp it. It smells god-awful. I mean, like,
I bet.
God-awful.
Yeah. So what is, have you ever seen any blackleg, or what's the thing that has caused the biggest issues that you've seen bringing other people's
I had
cattle?
a couple bad cases of pink eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. They had one.
And when you
really
say a bad case, it gets into both eyes, and then you can tell they go blind?
The bull ended up not going blind, but I didn't see it. Like, I'd go out and he didn't act weird or anything. I go out and I move them and I watch them when they walk through, and it was on me. I should have caught it, but.
Well, and they get, pink eye's hard, because I'll be like, well, do they have pink eye? Because they're starting to, their eyes are watering a lot or something.
Yeah,
but then
down here they'll get wet. Yeah, that one was on me. The bull was fine. We ended up patching him, and he was fine. But the other one had an absolute just batshit crazy heifer that I got her cornered, got her in a pen. This was this past year, and I told the guy, hey, I've got her in a pen. You want to come over and help me treat her? You want me to call the vet? And he goes, which one is it? So I told him, and he goes, just leave her. Said she's going in the freezer anyways. So it was another month, and it got bad, but she got butchered when she got on the trailer.
What it looked like when it got bad? Because I don't think I've ever actually seen it.
Oh, it's gross. If it gets really, really bad, their eye will rupture. Like
we had a couple
like
this year that
out.
got a little cloudy in their eye.
Yeah, that's the beginnings. You can treat that quick with some antibiotic. But hers was getting, like, it was fully clouded over, and if you let it go too long, it'll get to where the eye starts swelling, and the eye will actually, like, it doesn't explode or anything, but the eye will burst and they'll go completely blind. And it's gross.
Well, what would be some of your inspiring messaging to someone younger, or someone, because I think right now too, this is a good option for people in our situation, where we have more land than we have cattle right now, and it's just a difficult time to buy cattle. So what would be your message to people like that
have more land than?
Well, just people that are thinking about getting into this.
If you've got land and you want to graze cattle, it's really, really easy to do, easy to get into. Maybe not easy to do, but it's very easy to get into the business, because there are tons of people looking for pasture every single year. Like, more and more land gets taken out of pasture and goes into crop ground, or goes into CRP or something. So there's less and less pasture every year. But if you want to do what I'm doing, where you're going out and finding land to rent, and then finding cattle owners to put cattle on that land, one, go to a different area, because I work here. Go somewhere else. But if you want to do it, just think of people in your circle. Like, everyone's gonna know a farmer around here, and just go ask them. Or what I found was actually really helpful is go to the nearest sale barn when they have their sale, and just go sit there and listen to the old boys talk, and go sit next to somebody that. Or even go ask the sale barn, anybody looking for pasture in here, or who's the movers and shakers, and they'll tell you, like, oh, that guy over there, he runs quite a few, and they'll know somebody.
Yeah.
And that's just your first contact, and you're probably not going to get business from the very first person you talk to. It might take you 20 or 30 people, but you just put your name out there, make sure they get your number, get your card, whatever it is, and eventually you'll get a phone call. Yeah. I got one phone call from I called the extension, and I said, do you guys have any sort of like listing thing where it's cattle people looking for pasture, or pasture people looking to rent their pasture out? And she goes, no, we don't have anything like that. I said, all right, well, thanks anyways. And then, like, 6 months later, I got a phone call. Hey, I remembered you. Some guy called in looking for pasture, and I don't have anything like that, but I remembered your number, and so here you go. And I've been grazing for him for 2 years now.
That's awesome. All right, Joe, where can people find out some more information about you? Are you doing consulting yet?
Not getting paid for it.
Well, you're not supposed to say that on here. He's getting paid for it now.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't consider myself in a position where I should be consulting other people. Essentially, my advice is just do what works. I mean, if you want to do what works for you, and go on YouTube.
Yeah.
Go on YouTube, and YouTube University has taught a lot of people. It's taught me a lot of stuff. But people can find me. I mean, the best place is just look me up on Facebook if you want, and then send me a message. But I will be getting the website up and going here, xmarksthefarm.com, and you can hopefully find me on there. And I've got some grazing questionnaires and some landowner questionnaires and stuff like that for people, and they can get in touch with me. If I don't graze your cattle, if I don't rent your land, I definitely can find somebody that will.
Yeah, awesome. And you'll be at Marble Seed doing a presentation?
I'll be at Marble Seed doing a contract grazing workshop with Aaron Pape. We're both on the board of Grassworks, and we got approached. So he's going to talk a little bit about like the customer relations stuff, and then I'm going to talk about contracts. Real exciting stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming in, and make sure you reach out to Joe if you have any questions.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it, Taylor.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experience.